Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sideline Shenanigans. My name is Brian Jones. I'm your host. I have Coach Vance Shearer from New Haven High School in New Haven, Indiana. Coach, welcome.
Thanks. Appreciate you having me on.
What got you into coaching?
One, the love of the game. I was a three-sport athlete all the way up through my senior year of high school. I grew up with, my dad coaching me little league. He coached high school football. Kind of just ran in the family, and then as soon as I got back from college, they reached out to me about coaching, and it just kind of, been in love with it since. So.
How do you handle the balance between being a mentor and a disciplinarian?
That's a tough one. So, we always, preach, throughout our coaching staff, just building, relationships first with the kids. That way, when you have to crack down on them, they already have that respect and know that you care. You're not just doing it to be mean, you're doing it because you love them. And so that's a big thing, we try to do in our coaching staff is just build those relationships first and then go from there.
How do you build mental toughness in your program?
I think, it all starts in the weight room. That's been our big emphasis this offseason is just really, staying hard on them in the weight room, make sure we're, finishing reps. And that's where it all starts is, if you can push through a hard session in the weight room, it makes that so much easier when we get on the football field. Now, if we're going to translate from from the weight room to the football field is the next question. But I think that's where, we really build that foundation.
How do you handle pressure as a new head coach? I know you're in your second year, as you mentioned.
Right.
How do you handle the pressure?
I mean, there's nothing that can really, going from a assistant to an offensive coordinator to play calling to, being a head coach. There's nothing that, can really prepare you to make those jumps other than just, experience. Just trial by fire is what I've learned. And just, the more you do it, the easier it gets. Well, it's never easy, but, just the easier it gets handling that pressure and kind of just, taken from what I learned as an athlete and translating that to coaching is a big part of it.
How do you maintain a good balance between strictness and encouragement?
Well, they always say that sandwich method, give them a compliment first, tell them how you really feel, and then, end it with a, compliment. So we just try to really promote, good behaviors in the guys all the way from our young guys to seniors. If they're doing something good in the classroom or, they got a nice PR in the weight room, we really try to build them up. That way they just don't think we're always tearing them down. Then, when they're doing something wrong, we got to let them know. So just can't always be negative. We have to really let the guys know when they're doing a good job as well.
What would you say that defines the New Haven Bulldogs football team?
Well, what we want to be defined on. So, last year was kind of an anomaly. We, really trying to build for the future here. So we came up with a new little slogan, kind of the 5 pillars of New Haven football, DAWGS dogs. So discipline, accountability, work ethic, gratitude, and service. That's really what we want to build our program off of. Especially those first 3, and then that gratitude and service in the community is kind of just extra, but also, very important.
How do you encourage players to help one another succeed both on and off the field?
It's that not just personal accountability, but holding your teammates accountable. We did, a lot of leadership meetings in the winter on how to be a good teammate. If you see a guy doing something that doesn't necessarily align with our values, you got to let him know. And you don't have to necessarily, be an a-hole about it, but you got to, let your guy know when he's not doing something correct, that he could be better than that. So just, holding each other accountable. It's just, one of our 5 pillars. So it goes through, being a friend, being a teammate, being a student, all of the above.
What's your strategy for maintaining team chemistry throughout a long season? I know the football season is long.
Oh yeah.
Nine games is a long season. Plus, especially if you make it all the way through sectionals, that's 15 games.
Yeah. Yep. It is a long season. I mean, we've got limited contact practices now in the spring. We got summer football coming up. So really, it's potentially a 6-month thing. So really just, reminding the kids that it's not just about football. It's about becoming a young man. Eventually, you're going to have a job, you're going to have a family, you're building this mental toughness for the future, not just to win games, on the football field. Is, you're becoming a better person, a better man. And, if you can stick through these tough times, you'll be a better person for it down the road.
What's your process for scouting opponents?
Excuse me. So we meet Saturday mornings. We break it down. Each coach has a different responsibility. From an offensive perspective, we have a receivers coach is responsible for looking at the DBs. We have 2 receivers coaches. Running backs coach responsible looking at the linebackers, O-line looking at D-line. One picking out who their guys are, who their best players are, guys we may want to avoid. And then we also want to look for the weak links as well, guys that we can potentially attack and get a good matchup with. So we start with that first, kind of identifying their personnel, who they are, and then we really get into their scheme, see where they're lining up guys, how it lines up with field boundary, strength, really just figure out how and why they're aligning their guys to certain formations. And then we move on to the more in-depth things like, blitz, stunts, see if we see any tendencies on third down, first down, first quarter, fourth quarter, how their coach is calling it, really try to get into the mindset of their, defensive coordinator. That way we can potentially be prepared for what they're going to throw at us. So.
Okay. I'm looking at your schedule currently. I see you guys got Fort Wayne, Northrop,
Yes, sir.
and Fort Wayne North, DeKalb, Leo, Norwell, Columbia City, Belmont, East Noble, and Huntington North. Pretty decent schedule. Pretty tough schedule.
Absolutely.
How are you going to handle the schedule when things get tough? I know Leo's a really, really tough team to play against.
Yep. We got a strong conference. There's really no one we can overlook. The top's really good. Like you said, Leo, East Noble, Columbia City, all really good programs that, they're disciplined, things we strive to be. So, we kind of just take it week by week. Northrop and Northside, they've got a ton of athletes. It's going to be a good test for us. Now those are bigger schools. It'll be a good opportunity for us to see what we've got. And then really focus on what we need to fix for conference play because, like you said, we get a tough conference. It's a tough schedule. So, but you like it that way. You don't want to just take weeks off or anything like that. I think it's important to stay sharp week by week and prepare you for the postseason.
Yeah, especially like when it comes sectional time. For example, if you're playing Bishop Dwenger,
Yep.
Decent, perennially good program. It's Leo, like you guys, perennially good. DeKalb even. They're decent.
Yeah.
What's the hardest team to play in your sectional?
That's a good question. I mean, it just depends. Dwanger's obviously tough. Like you said, they play in even, some would say a better conference than us in the SAC. So, they're playing, tough schools on a daily basis. Really, there's no one that's weak. It's similar to our conference, a lot of the same teams. So there's no, you get a bye draw or whatever. It's, there's no off week. So, that's where that strong regular season schedule comes into play. But I would say traditionally probably Dwenger, but I mean, on any given year, it can be any of those teams.
So looking at last season, I see you guys drop to Northrop by 5 points.
Yes, sir.
That's a heartbreaker. Lures to 2 points. The call kind of a off game.
Right.
Same with Leo.
Right.
Norwell, that's a close game.
Yeah.
in Columbia City.
Yeah. Not a good one.
That's
Not a good one at all. Yeah.
no. But the win against Belmont, very impressive.
Yep.
Which I'm not sure how Belmont is. I'm not used to them. I'm used to more south
Right. Right.
of
I got you.
Lafayette, but like like you guys, if you guys would have scored, like if it was like Lures, that's a really good program.
Yeah. They went to the state championship 2A. So,
Yeah, like you can't like that's impressive to say, hey, we lost to a state championship team by 2 points. And Northrop, a 6A school, and
right.
you're playing them as a 4A. That's crazy.
Right. Yeah, it was the beginning of the season was tough. I try not to go back and think what would have happened if we would have won, those first two games, how the season would have turned out. High school kids, losing can be, infectious after you drop a few.
Mhm.
Um, it's easy to get stuck in the same rut and, the same pattern. So I try not to think about it too much, but it's hard not to. How the
Right,
season
right.
would have been differently if we would have won those first two games.
Absolutely. And how many returning starters do you have?
Well, it depends on how you look at it because we had a lot of injuries last year, so we had kids who ended up playing at the end of the season who wouldn't, on a normal basis, been starters. So I would say anywhere between 8 to 12 because we had some freshmen who end up playing. They're going to come back and start for us, but I don't know if I would necessarily say they're a returning starter.
Okay.
They've
Okay.
started a few games due to injury, but anywhere 8 to 12.
But yeah, like if you guys would have like if it like you guys lost by 2 points by a touchdown to Lures and
Yep,
Northrop, those are winnable games. And
absolutely.
sometimes you can't win those winnable games,
Yeah, we learned that very easily.
unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately. What inspired you to become a football coach?
I touched on it a little bit. I have to give a lot of credit to my dad, coaching me as I'm growing up, just seeing his passion for it. When I got out of college, I got to coach with him a little bit before he stepped away. And I've actually brought him back on the staff for this year. So really just seeing his love for it and, his love for New Haven. And, he kind of instilled the same thing in me, just the pride in this community that raised me. And, it's just just seeing it from my father was probably the biggest aspect that drove me to get into it. And then, like I said, I just fell in love with it as soon as I started doing it. So
All right. How do you handle stress and pressure from the community and media?
not very well. I mean, last year was tough. Like I said, I'm a New Haven guy. Just I would be lying to you if I said there wasn't some embarrassment on my end with how last year turned out. But then I gotta, I don't want to make excuses, but I gotta tell myself it wasn't, the most fortunate. I mean, there were unfortunate circumstances, and as long as I'm continuing to learn and improve, we just get better week by week or year by year. If you want to look at it from a zoomed out scale, then I'm happy with the way things are going. So if we can just improve this year and, improve the program as a whole, all the way from top to bottom, our PAL program, all the way up to the high school level, then, I'll be happy with the way things are going.
How did you know you were ready to be a head coach?
With the way it happened, I don't even necessarily know if I was 100% ready. And, nothing can prepare you for
Mhm.
the stresses and, the responsibility of being a head coach. I don't think I really, had another option because looking around, our head coach left. Our defensive coordinator went to St. Francis and NAIA school. Our previous offensive coordinator, who was kind of passing the baton to me a little bit, tragically passed away in the spring. So just looking around the staff and the options you have 2 weeks before, the season started, I think I was probably the best option, the most experienced, and been in the program the longest. But it definitely a learning experience last year. For my defensive coordinator, for me, all the young coaches we had, we learned a lot. Brought some new coaches on, a little more experience, so we'll be much more prepared this year. And definitely just a learning year. You just got to continue to try to be better. So
I've heard this quote by so many coaches. No coach has a perfect season.
right.
No coach has a perfect season, and I know I've never coached a day in my life. Maybe from the couch, watching
Yeah, there you go. We all do
Colts
that.
games,
Yeah,
Notre Dame games. But anyway, like my best advice to coaches: have a mentor. Look for that mentor in your life,
yeah,
whether it's a former coach, your father, a friend, your older brother. It could be anybody.
yeah, absolutely.
It could be heck. It could be your assistant coach, even
Yeah,
though you're the head coach.
and some, a lot of my assistant coaches know a hell of a lot more than me when it comes to their position, and they've been doing it a long time. So I, learn from those guys all the time.
All right, coach. We're gonna get into some shenanigans here.
All right.
What's the most memorable prank your team has pulled on you?
The most memorable prank, well, after I initially got the job 2 weeks before the season started, I was doing the interview with the news station for the initial interview. And they gave me one of those ice baths or water baths, Gatorade showers or whatever, right at the end of the interview. And I had no idea it was coming. It's a classic one. It's timeless. So, I just wasn't prepared for it. So that was pretty good.
What's the strangest food you've eaten at a team dinner?
The strangest food. That's a good one. We go to a local church and they do a pretty good job. Strangest food. I don't know. Hot dogs. I mean, they're not the most popular, but that I would say that's probably the strangest. But nothing crazy.
All right, coach. What's the best team bonding activity you've done with the Bulldogs?
That's a good one. During our team camp last year, and this is still, when Coach Brewer was the head coach, we just in between practices went over to Jury Pool, our local pool, and kind of blew off some steam in between. That was a really good one. We did some volunteer work with an Easter egg hunt with another one of our local churches here over Easter. The kids really enjoyed that. It was a glow in the dark Easter egg hunt, and they spread out the eggs and kind of did crowd control for the kids. And it was good for us to get back to the community, and I was kind of surprised of how much our kids really enjoyed being there and doing that. So I thought that was a really good one for us here this spring.
Okay, if you had to play, if New Haven had a movie about their football program, who would play you?
Oh man, I don't know. Let's see. I'm trying to think of a redheaded actor. I'm not big into pop culture and stuff like that, so off the top of my head, I couldn't tell
Okay.
you. So just any redheaded actor would probably be good.
I can't think of one. I can think of like Ed Sheeran, but
Yeah, but he's a singer, so he's been in some
yeah,
movies, I think, hasn't
yeah,
he?
I think
Yeah,
so.
we'll go with that. His last name's similar to mine too. Some of the junior high kids call me Ed Sheeran, so we'll go with that.
What's the worst excuse you've ever heard from a player missing practice?
Oh, I get them all the time. Should probably start writing down a list. Um, we get a bunch. I don't know. We have kids miss school because they had to, get an ID. Like it's going to take all day long.
Right.
Birthdays
Right.
is a big one. Like my second cousin's third birthday. Gosh, we have all kinds. You know what? I'm going to start writing down a list because we've got so many. I need to keep those in my back pocket. But maybe I'll get back to you sometime on that one.
What's the funniest thing a player has said to you during a game?
During a game. Gosh, these are tough questions. During a game. Well, we didn't do a whole lot of laughing last year with our record and the way the season went. So hopefully, there's don't want a ton of joking around on the sideline, but hopefully there's a little more of that this year. So once again, another one I'll have to get back to you on.
Okay. If you could prank any other coach in the state, who would it be and how would you do it?
Any other coach in the state? Gosh, these are good. I'm trying to think of who I've coached with and where guys are at. I don't know. Once again, I'm sorry. I'm not.
No, you're all right. You're all
answers
right.
for you here. That's tough.
It is tough. Like,
those are good questions, though, man. I like that. I'll have to. Once again, maybe I'll put some more thought into it and send you an email or something. Get back to you.
Absolutely. What's the most unusual thing you've ever seen during a game?
Most unusual thing. Well, I've seen some, gross injuries. Unusual thing. Well, when I was a high school player, this was a good one. We know those kicking nets on the sideline. We had a kid who was, a backup player, wasn't a kicker at all. And it's like fourth quarter, middle of an intense game. And, he's screwing around. He has no investment in the game whatsoever, not a kicker. Was kicking a ball into the net, and he's lucky a coach didn't see him, doing it in the first place, and just completely shanked one onto the middle of the field as the play's going on. So there's a random ball flying out there. He got in a lot of trouble for that, but that's probably the most unusual thing I've seen. That was pretty funny too. That was good. I'll remember that forever.
What's the weirdest football drill you've ever seen or came up with yourself?
The weirdest football. Probably, those quarterback drills where they're, throwing pads at the quarterbacks and stuff and, making them dodge random objects. I do a little bit of that with, pocket pressure and stuff like that. But I've seen some videos online of them throwing stuff at quarterbacks, and you've probably seen the Ben Roethlisberger one.
Yes.
Yes. Completely ignoring it. But yeah, that's probably the weirdest.
All right, Coach, I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm Brian Jones. He's Vance Shearer. Thank you for listening.